Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. VA SSI recipients with eligible children need to act by May 5th to quickly add money to their automatic economic impact payment. Plus $500 push continues. Special alert for VA SSI recipients who don't file a tax return and have dependents. Note that this message is going out to specific individuals, those individuals being VA and SSI recipients who don't file a tax return and have dependents. So just to kind of recap this, note that the payment is going to be going out based on the 2018 or 2019 taxes. Some individuals don't file taxes for 2018 and 2019, possibly because they don't need to. Specifically, we're focusing in on those individuals here for the VA and SSI recipients. So those individuals might not be filing a tax return, may not need to file a tax return in that situation. The IRS is working with those institutions, however, to still be able to process out the economic impact payment. So they're going to have enough information to basically do that by just knowing that they're a VA or SSI recipient that doesn't file a tax return. They can calculate the payment, hopefully send it out to the same location that the recipient is getting funding from the VA at, and everything should work out fine. However, if there is more information that they need, which is going to be something like a dependent child or something like that, which could affect the amount of the payment, they're going to need that information, and they're calling for that soon. If for those people, which probably isn't a whole lot of the population, right? For those people that fall into that specific situation, so that they can calculate the payment correctly. Back to the text. IR 2020-81, April 24th, 2020, Washington. The Internal Revenue Service today issued a special alert for the Supplemental Security Income and Department of Veterans Affairs beneficiaries to act by May 5th if they don't file a tax return in 2018 or 2019 and have dependents, so they can quickly receive the full amount of their economic impact payment. So bottom line, we're talking people that didn't file 2018 and 2019, but they didn't have to, and their associated are getting payments from the Department of Veteran Affairs and beneficiaries. Therefore, they don't have to file a tax return in general. So you're still okay. You're okay that you didn't file a tax return. You should still get the economic impact payment. However, if you're falling into a situation where you have this dependent, that's where they want the more information. And they're going to want that more information by May 5th. Now, there's special tools that have been provided to provide that information without, in essence, filing a whole another tax return that you may want to look into. Back to the text. Their $1,200 payment will be issued soon, and in order to add the $500 per eligible child amount to these payments, the IRS needs the dependent information before the payments are issued. So that's what they're missing. They know who the individual is, because they're working with the VA to do that. They know they haven't filed a tax return because they have the tax returns, and they have an individual that didn't file a tax return that's getting payments from the VA, so they can send out a check, but they don't know about any kind of eligible child, which could affect the amount of the payment. That's the information they need. Back to the text. Otherwise, their payment at this time will be $1,200, and by law, additional $500 per eligible child amount will be paid in association with the return filing for tax year 2020. So what if you don't do this? What if it doesn't happen? Well, they should still have your information from the VA. They should still be able to process the check. They just don't have the added information for the dependent child. Therefore, they should process everything out, and you should receive a $1,200 if you do the $1,200, even if you didn't file 2018 and 2019. If you get payments from the VA, and you just won't have that added $500 if you don't give them this added information. Quote. Back to the text, quote, "We want to plus $500 these groups so they can get their maximum economic impact payment of $1,200 and their $500 for each eligible child as quickly as possible," end quote, said Commissioner Chuck Reddick. Quote, "They'll get $1,200 automatically, but they need to act quickly and use the non-filers tool on irs.gov, irs.gov to get the extra $500 per child added to their payment. Everyone should share this information widely and help others with the plus $500 push so that more Americans can get more money as fast as possible," end quote. Following extensive work by the IRS and partner government agencies, $1,200 automatic payments will be starting soon for those receiving Social Security, retirement, survivor, or disability benefits, SSDI, railroad retirement benefits, Supplemental Security Income, SSI, and VA compensation and pension C&P beneficiaries who don't file a tax return in the last 2 years. No action is needed by these groups. They will automatically receive their $1,200 payment. So again, general rule, they're going to base this thing on 2019. If you haven't filed 2019, they're going to base it on 2018 tax return. If you haven't filed 2019 or 2018, and you fall into one of these groups where you're receiving some type of beneficiary from them, you still should be okay. You shouldn't have to do anything, shouldn't have to file a tax return. You should still get the $1,200. However, if there's some situation where there would be an added amount to it, such as a qualifying child, they would need that information back to the text. For VA and SSI recipients who have a qualifying child and didn't file a 2018 or 2019 tax return, they have a limited window to register to have $500 per eligible child added automatically to their soon-to-be received $1,200 economic impact payment. A quick trip to a special non-filer tools. So this is the special tool here. There's a link to this here. You can have a link. There'll be a link to this in the description. So you can go to this tool. This tool is not an actual full tax return because they don't need the full tax return. They don't need your income information because they know that you're under the income limitation on taxable income, because the income you're receiving from the benefits may not be taxable, which might be the reason you're not required to file. So they know that you're not at the income limitation, so they just need the information to calculate the economic impact payment, therefore, which would be the qualifying child. So it should be an easier tool to use than actually processing a tax return. Back to the text, you can find it on the IRS.gov website. They want it by May 5th for these groups. May help put all their eligible economic impact payments into a single payment. So if you're able to do that soon, then and you get it qualified for the $500 per eligible child, you should get a larger payment sooner, which would be nice. So the non-filers tool is available in English and Spanish. To help spread the word to recipients with children about this special plus $500 push, the IRS has additional material available on a special partners page. There's a link to that here, that can be shared with friends, family members, and community groups. SSI and VA recipients have a child but don't file a tax return. Visit irs.gov now. SSI and VA recipients who have children and who weren't required to file a tax return in 2018 or 2019 should visit the non-filers interpayment information tool on the irs.gov. That's the IRS website, irs.gov. There's a link to the non-filer tool here. By quickly taking steps to enter information on the IRS website about them and their qualifying children, they can receive the $500 per dependent child payment automatically in addition to their $1,200 individual payment. Otherwise, their payment at this time will be $1,200. By law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a return filing for tax year 2020. So if you don't do that, you still have access to the extra $500, but it's going to take a lot longer to do so, and you'll have to actually file a return when you don't normally, you're not required to file a return normally, and the return is going to be a little bit longer to file. Not too bad if there's not a lot of income to report on it, but the non-filer tool should be easier than filing the tax return, you would think, because it's just an information. You don't need the income information. Back to the text. SSI and VA recipients who receive compensation and pension C&P benefit payments should receive their automatic payments by mid-May. If they have children and aren't required to file a tax return, both groups are urged to use the non-filer tools as soon as possible before the May 5th deadline. Once the deadline passes and processing begins on the $1,200 payment, they will not be eligible to use the non-filer tool. So obviously, once the payments are starting to be processed, you can't use the tool because they're trying to put that $1,200 and the extra $500 per eligible child together in one payment. That's the point of the tool. And then once the time has passed it, you would think, well, maybe I can still use the tool and they can just give me the $500 later instead of actually filing a tax return. And they're saying no. They're saying we're only using this special tool up to the point in time of May 5th, and then we're removing it. And if you want the $500 after that point in time, you'll have to actually file the tax return, which is a bit more cumbersome of a task and can take longer. Back to the text. Their payment will be $1,200, and by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with a return filing for tax year 2020. SSA railroad retirees economic impact payment arriving next week. For recipients of Social Security retirement, survivors and disability insurance benefits, SSDI, and railroad retirement benefits, RRB, automatic payments of $1,200 are scheduled to begin arriving next week. No action is needed on their part. This includes people who don't normally file a tax return. For Social Security, RRB beneficiaries who don't normally file a tax return have a child or registered using the IRS non-filer tool by the April 22nd deadline. So notice they have a different deadline because of the time period of when they're pushing these things out. So back to the text, more payments are scheduled to begin arriving next week as well. For SSA RRB beneficiaries who don't normally file a tax return and have a child but did not register on the IRS filers tool by April 22nd, so their deadline was April 22nd, note, back to the text, they will still receive their automatic $1,200 beginning next week. Given the deadline has passed by law, the additional $500 per eligible child amount would be paid in association with filing the tax return for 2020. This group can no longer use the non-filer tool. So if you fall into this group, the deadline for them was April 22nd. So if they fall into that situation where they have a qualifying child that could affect the amount of the payment and hadn't used the tool up to that point, they can no longer use the tool, which would be an easier thing. So again, you might say, hey, can't I use the tool now? And then you could just send me the extra $500. And that's apparently not. The IRS is saying, no, that's not the point of the tool. We wanted the tool to be there for us to send out one payment for whatever the amount is. And if that deadline is passed, the tool is gone for you, whatever your deadline is. And then you're going to have to actually file a tax return. So you still have access to it, but it's going to take a lot longer, and you'll have to process the actual tax return. A little bit more cumbersome to do so. Back to the text. Note, Direct Express account holders. You may use the non-filer tool, but cannot receive your children's payment on your Direct Express account. You may only select a bank account for direct deposit or leave bank information blank and receive the money by mail. No action needed by most taxpayers. The Treasury Department will make these automatic payments to SSA, SSI, RRB, and VA recipients. Recipients will generally receive their automatic $1,200 payment by direct deposit, direct express, debit card, or by paper check, just as they would normally receive their benefits. So they're basically saying, hey, look, we're trying to address those special situations where there's some action that is needed, but in the most part, they have worked with these other institutions in order for it to be automatic. So for most people, it should be automatic unless you fall into one of these special groups where more information is needed. Back to the text. For more information related to veterans and beneficiaries who receive compensation and pension CNP benefits payments from VA, please visit va.gov, va.gov. General IRS information about the economic impact payment is available on special section of the irs.gov website. There's a link to this here. Watch out for scams related to economic impact payments. The IRS urges taxpayers to be on the lookout for scams related to economic impact payments. There is no fee required to receive these payments. So note, again, a lot of money being pushed out here by the IRS in terms of payments and a lot of things with regards to the circumstances now. That means that scammers are scamming right now. So phishing emails and things like that. Anybody whose chart says that they need your information, be very skeptical about that. Come back to the IRS website in order to check things. So don't respond to them directly. Go to the source, to the IRS website. And if anybody says, hey, look, you need to pay me for a fee to get the payment, then that's probably not good typically. So just be on the lookout for the scams much more most likely than normal.